All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's Cloud Salon. We're really lucky today to have Sam Lavigne joining us today. So before we begin, I'm going to read a land acknowledgement to start the event off. So we would like to acknowledge the Lenape people who are the original inhabitants of Lenape-Hoking and the island of Manhattan. The land the New School University is built upon, including all of New York City, present-day New Jersey, and eastern Pennsylvania along the Delaware River watershed, western Long Island, and the lower Hudson Valley, comprise Lenape ancestral homeland. This land was not ceded nor sold, as folklore would have us believe, to the Dutch for beads and trinkets. This land was forcibly taken through occupation by European settlers, resulting in displacement, forced migration, and genocide. In the present day, there are Lenape communities throughout Northern America, though much of the original Lenape territory remains under settler occupation and control. As settlers who have benefited from the colonization of sovereign land, we acknowledge our responsibilities to examine and question systems of oppression that continue through to the present day and educate ourselves about the original stewards of this land. We also want to acknowledge the Haudenosaunee iron workers from the Six Nation of the Iroquois, mostly from Mohawk tribe, whose labor built the many iconic skyscrapers and steel bridges in New York City. As recently as 2012, about 200 of the 2,000 structural iron workers in New York City were Mohawk. Every day we view the city skyline of Manhattan, we're reminded of their contribution. Really glad to be returning to Cloud Salon and being with you all today. As you all may already know, Cloud Salon is really meant to be a very welcoming and intimate environment where artists are invited to share their experience and their practices, and you all get to ask any kind of questions you want afterward. So please feel free, as Sam is going through his talk, to start thinking about the possible questions you can ask, and feel free to type it in the chat if you want to just have it queued up. And we'll also give the option to have you, unmute your mic and speak into the space. So without further ado, I'm going to hand the mic over to Sam to introduce himself.
Great. Thanks so much, Shin. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be with all of you today. So yeah, I'll go ahead and share my screen, and just give me a second. And I'm using a borrowed computer, so everything is a little bit out of it. Just one sec. Okay, great. Yeah, and so I think do feel free, if you have questions or comments or whatever, you can feel free to interrupt at any time. I really don't mind, or if you prefer to wait till afterwards, that's fine too. But yeah, my name is Sam Lavigne. I'm an artist and a teacher. I'm currently teaching in the design department at UT Austin. That's University of Texas at Austin. Although I don't really think of myself much as a designer, but I'm someone who does a lot of work on the internet, but on the internet and kind of about the internet. I use computation and data science and kind of sort of techniques from conceptual art a lot in my practice. And yeah, so today I'll just talk a little bit about kind of my background and some of the projects that I've worked on. So I work a ton with computers, but actually as an undergrad, I studied literature, comparative literature, and I kind of never properly took a computer science class in my entire life. And I went to a school. I went to a school called University of Chicago, which is it's a really interesting place that's both at the same time super conservative, like a lot of like sort of terrible economists come from the University of Chicago, and also has like a really kind of like left-wing bent to it too. So I think that like it's sort of like siloed into these sort of like very interesting like left and right sections of the school, sort of based on like what department you're in. And uh, I guess like while I was there, I learned about, because some of my professors were Marxist. I like learned a little bit about Marxism, and particularly like I learned a lot about, or something about, a group of mostly French Marxists from the 60s who are called the Situationists. And uh, they had these, two, I guess you could say, concepts in their work that they elaborated in their writing that were really inspirational to me, and have been continued to be in some way inspirations to my work. And these are this notion of the derive, which is a kind of aimless, non-commercial wandering through the city. You could also apply it to virtual spaces. And another concept called détournement, which means more or less, you could translate that to hijacking. That's like the hijacking of signs or symbols or media, sort of like thinking about like existing kind of like mainstream popular media and taking those signs and symbols and hijacking them to express like a left-wing politics, right? And so I was doing kind of like these readings and thinking about this stuff, and after school I had no way to like make money, so I sort of taught myself some web development, and I was just like making people like PHP websites and stuff like that. And I also was doing these. I moved to San Francisco, and I was making these like street games with my friends, like kind of like ways of exploring some of these, starting to kind of like explore some of these ideas that I like kind of like learned about as like an undergrad. And the street games would be like, you like play like a game of like tag across the city at night, right? Stuff like that. And I guess like after like a while of like making these street games and doing web dev to make money, I sort of like got a little fed up and decided to go back to school. And I went back to school when I was kind of like probably like a little bit on the like older side to go to grad school. I guess I was probably like 30-ish. Um, and after 30 though, I think I was after 30 and maybe like 31. And I came to New York, came here, and I went to ITP, which is, not too dissimilar from Parsons. Of course, it's not the same, but it is different. And I sort of started to learn how to take some of that self-taught programming skills that I had, and like applying them for creative or artistic outcomes. And like one thing that's like really like kind of interesting about ITP is that I think of it, it's not really like an art school. It's sort of like an arts and crafts school in a lot of ways, right? I don't know if that's like a similar experience to Parsons or not, but like I think ITP really is kind of like tech arts and crafts, and it really is like a bring your own theory type of place, right? So there's a lot of sort of drive to produce, which for me was really great, because I think I was like kind of a shy producer of art before then, but there wasn't like a lot of like theory, right? It was all kind of like practice. And so I continued to sort of be interested in some of the things that I had, like learned about as an undergrad, but also things that I just like, kind of continued my own, like, I guess like, education, like after undergrad, and like, and, in reading, and, I like participated in like Occupy Wall Street and reading groups and stuff like that. So I sort of was like, kind of brought all those texts with me, but I also brought this idea with me. So maybe a ridiculous idea, but that you can kind of like treat the world as like a series of texts almost, right? Like a series of texts that can be interpreted. And I started to think of like consumed and interpreted. And I started to think about like how I could apply some of these thoughts to my experiences of just like being on the internet, and the relationships that we sort of form on the internet, and the way that the web and different websites really sort of, you know, structure our lives. They both represent the structure of society, and they also structure our lives in doing so, right? They produce and reproduce their own social and political context. And so if you start to think about the web as a series of texts that can be consumed and interpreted, the questions you start to ask are like, what can websites tell us? Like, what's hiding in plain sight online? And so sort of like a lot of my work has become about, not all of it, but a lot of my work has become about kind of like looking and looking at the web and downloading massive quantities of content from the web and creating archives. And to do this, I use a technique called web scraping, which is just like when you write a program to browse the web on your behalf. And I'll just show you like a few sort of like, even like this is like stuff from my grad school days, like the kind of like initial attempts to do this. And then I'll show you sort of how this kind of like evolved in my practice. So this is like a very early, these are early attempts, right? To kind of like look at the web as text and to see like what the internet's telling us. This one is about Alibaba, the incredible website alibaba.com. And all this is just a, again, like this is like a grad school project. Like I just downloaded I started to like, you know, look at Alibaba and be like, what's weird about Alibaba? And so I started to search for things I didn't expect to find. So I was looking for the word riot gear, and I found like, oh, there's actually like tons of riot gear for sale on Alibaba. So this is like all the riot gear for sale on Alibaba, sorted by minimum order price from highest to lowest, and visualized by like a minimum order quantity. So you can kind of like scroll to the left and see like, you know, all these different objects of riot gear that are for sale, right? And then you can actually like zoom into, and you can sort of see like it's represented as a kind of like what you would need to order like 100 pieces of this riot shield to make the minimum order quantity. So there's actually like 100 of the riot shields listed here, right? And then like looking at this, you also see, you know, I started to see like other things that were like extremely disturbing. So one of the things that they sell on Alibaba also is like human labor, right? So you can buy construction workers on Alibaba. You can buy nannies on Alibaba. And to me, like what this is saying, besides just being like very revealing about what exploitative labor practices, is how, you know, on Alibaba, what Alibaba is telling us is that labor is a commodity like anything else, right? And there's a kind of evening out. The next project, quite similar, called 3 Degrees of Separation from the Military Industrial Prison Data Surveillance State, was like one of my first attempts. I use LinkedIn a lot in my work. One of my first attempts to use LinkedIn as a project, and this sort of started in a similar way. I went to LinkedIn and I started to punch in phrases that I wasn't necessarily expecting to see results for. So, you know, on LinkedIn, you can get like endorsed for skills and, you know, like Photoshop or web development, but you can also get endorsed for skills like counterterrorism and surveillance and interrogation and enforcement. So these are all people on LinkedIn who have been endorsed at being good at the skill of interrogation, right, by other LinkedIn users. And because at the time I only knew how to scrape LinkedIn for people that were within 2 or 3 degrees of separation from me, this is like me in the middle, and this is like the 2nd degree connections, and these are the 3rd degrees connections here on LinkedIn. And again, like the question, and maybe I won't even answer this, but like, what is LinkedIn telling us by having skill endorsements for people that are like enforcement and interrogation and surveillance and counterterrorism and homeland security? What is being revealed that is hidden in plain sight by this way of structuring information? Okay. And then more recently, like again, like I sort of continued to develop this practice. I start to call it scrapism, which is like a kind of web scrapism, which is just thinking about web scraping as an art practice, or massive data collection as an art practice. And then in collaboration with my frequent collaborator, Tiga Blaine, we made 2 projects over the course of the pandemic. that were really like these sort of, we call them archives that shouldn't exist. And they're using a very similar technique. So the first is called New York Apartment. And it's like kind of a nightmarish exploration of New York real estate. So to make this, we downloaded every single for sale real estate listing in New York City, and then kind of combined them into this one gigantic mega listing. So it's like if you took all the apartments for sale in New York together, they would cost like $43 billion, and they'd be like 65,000 bedrooms and 55,000 bathrooms, and they'd be 36 million square feet. And then kind of broke down like what makes up a real estate listing and kind of put them in these different columns. So we get all of the questions from all of the listings. Like, are you looking for a deal? Are you looking for a great investment home? Are you looking for a loft-like open space with both light view luxury condo services? Are you looking for beautiful open views, etc.? 20,000 images of all the bedrooms, right? So here's like every single bedroom, right? You can go down. Bathrooms, kitchens, 14,000 kitchens, dining rooms, living rooms, and so on. The gyms, I love the gyms. All the sentences that start with the phrase the apartment, right? Okay. And then we downloaded the floor plans and extruded them and created these like 3D spaces. So you can like visualize like every single apartment if it were laid out like a kind of like rat's maze. As you can see, oh, there it goes. So you can kind of like wander around this giant space, right? I'll close it, and then we sort of did the same thing as like a high rise and a pyramid and a skinny tower. Super cuts of these video tours, so like the things that they say most when they make video tours
of the apartment. About the apartment.
The
I don't
apartment.
know if you can hear that or
The
not.
apartment. The apartment. Bring the apartment.
The apartment. The apartment. The apartment.
The apartment.
That adjective noun combinations, like sort of features, also crazy large, a mortgage calculator, and then finally like all the real estate agents. And so like, you know, this is a fun kind of fun, like originally like when you clicked on these names, it would actually like you would actually call the real estate, these different real estate agents. And I had this button at the top that would put you all into this like giant group chat with all of them together. So like open up iMessages and kind of try to send a message to all of them. And then this was a commission for the Whitney Museum, and they made us take that down. Okay. And then the next one, and I guess this is kind of in the series, is called Get Well Soon. And it's sort of like a similar proposal, but it's about healthcare rather than housing. So, you know, New York Apartment's about what does it mean when like housing is a commodity, right? And Get Well Soon is like, what does it mean when healthcare is a commodity? And what does that look like? And what's the experience of it, right? And so this project is 200,000 sentences of well-wishing that are scraped from the website GoFundMe.com. You know, GoFundMe is like medical fundraiser site. So people, you know, when they have medical emergencies that aren't being covered by their insurance, they ask for money from their friends and family and strangers on GoFundMe. And when you give them money, you might leave a little comment that says like, get well soon, for example. And so we just sort of went and downloaded hundreds of thousands of those comments of just like people wishing each other well, and stuck them into this one huge website. And I won't read them to you, but it's like, again, quite extensive series of lists. And for us, this is like it's really fucked up, but it's this very like fucked up contradictory archive, right? Because it's like on the one hand, all these genuine messages of solidarity and hope, right? But at the same time, they're messages of solidarity and hope that only exist because of terrible systemic injustice, right? And in that sense, it's an archive that really shouldn't exist. Okay, I'll go just a few more. I won't do all of these. So that's sort of like this impulse I had to kind of like make these archives. And I guess like the sort of second sort of thread of my work is more about like sabotage and like intervention and this concept I was mentioning before, détournement or hijacking of systems, right? So I really like to kind of like take existing systems that I find and experiment with them, right? And figure out ways to like use them for more radical political ends, or even just to like kind of goofily have fun, right? So an example of this is a project called White Collar Crime Risk Zones, which is a white collar crime predictor. So I got really interested. I was at the New Inquiry magazine for a while, and I was kind of like taking some of my programming work and applying it in the context of this like anarchist literary magazine. And they did a issue about police abolition, and sort of provide support for that. Some colleagues and I there made this project that was interrogating predictive policing. So predictive policing is just when you create a system to predict where and when crime will happen based on where and when crime has already happened. And police departments across the country are like using predictive policing as we speak to determine like where to deploy like cops, basically, right? So we were like, well, why, kind of interested in thinking about like, well, what is counted as crime, but also like what really is a predictive policing system? And so we reproduced a predictive policing system, but instead of using data about like street crime, we used data about white collar crime, so financial crime, right? And then made this like kind of like a system that predicts where and when financial crime will really where financial crime will occur. And so it's kind of like you get this like heat map. These sort of redder, darker squares are the predictions for where financial crime will occur. And of course, it's sort of like exactly where you would expect it. It's like in the financial district and like in Midtown and stuff, right? We also sort of provide these like, you can like click on each of these squares to get a little bit more detail about what the predictions are, right? So you get these like likely risk likelihoods, like oh, there's going to be defamation and failure to pay in this zone, and like nearby financial firms that are institutional suspects, and then these are like individual white collar criminal suspects. These are the facial averages of high level financial executives who work in the area, like who work in these squares. I scraped them from LinkedIn, and you can see they're sort of like all the same, but they're sort of all different. Oh, I've never heard of this restaurant, the Horny Ram. Amazing. Anyway, so this is also an iPhone app, and you kind of like can download it, and it'll send you push notifications when you enter a high risk zone for white collar crime. Okay, and then I'll just do one more, which is the Zoom Escaper, and this is a pretty silly one, but this is during the pandemic, and I again was kind of interested in this idea of exploring like digital sabotage, or what does it mean to do sabotage and work short stoppage, right? Like when the means of production aren't like a factory floor, but they're your personal devices, right? So it's like, what does it mean like if you wanted to like go on strike or you couldn't go on strike, so you wanted to do some active sabotage, but the only way that you are making money is like, yeah, with your computer or your phone. And of course, this isn't just like about like middle class workers. It's also about like working class folks, because so many people have like gig economy jobs that are all like mediated by personal devices like cell phones, right? So I was kind of like playing around with just like this concept, and came up with this idea of the Zoom Escaper, which acts as a form of self sabotage. So it basically like helps you get out of Zoom meetings. I would run it, but I'm actually not on my computer, so I don't have it properly set up. But basically, I can play you like a little video. The video tutorial is kind of fun, so you can get
What if you could do SEO smarter
it's
and faster? With Wix, you can edit your meta tags page by.
Hi, I'm Sam, and I'm the inventor of the Zoom Escaper, which is a tool to help you escape unbearable to other people. So okay, well, I can't play it because it's like you're gonna go to Zoom. Something is like not working here. So I'll just tell you what it does. Basically, like you sort of do this little setup, and then you can kind of pipe your voice through this website and add things like echo or bad connection, or make it sound like someone is crying in your apartment, or there's like dogs barking or wind or construction, or someone is urinating. And the idea again is just to like make yourself like sort of unbearable to others so that they ask you to leave the meeting. Okay, and I'll just conclude with like a few little other things. And one thing that's become like really like important to me is you know, like as someone who works a lot with technology, you do a lot of things with free and open source software. And so I've started to try to, whenever I can, like contribute back or create new tools that that are free and open source. So like a few of these are Videograph, which is like a tool that lets you automatically make supercuts from videos. So it looks for lines of dialogue in videos, and then you can like make new automatic edits of the video that just contains like particular words. So let's see if these videos play. Hopefully they will.
The experiences, experience, 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 experiences, and experiences, experience, experiences, experience, experiences, 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 experience, experiences, experiences, experience, experience.
So you get the point. That's, you know, Mark Zuckerberg saying the experience over and over again. Then, you know, this is absolutely unbearable. Donald Trump saying his own name for 4 minutes, and so on. And yeah, so you can like download the code for this, or it's a command line tool, and you can kind of run it yourself and make your own fun videos. And then the kind of like last little bit of my practice is I just, you know, end up teaching and working with P5 a lot. So I have this extension for P5 that for Visual Studio Code, which is, you know, a code editor that a lot of people like to use. And it just sort of like lets you make P5 sketches from within Visual Studio Code. And then finally, and this is like a really fun one, another collaboration with my frequent collaborator and partner, Tiga Brain, a kind of unholy combination of P5 and Riso. Like, I don't know if you guys have access to a risograph printer at Parsons. Maybe you do, hopefully you do, but it's sort of like this fun sort of like photocopier screen printer combo. And this is a set of tools that lets you make P5 sketches that can become risograph prints, like things that look like this, right? Yeah, so again, like it's just sort of become important to me to try to kind of like give back in that way. And yeah, maybe I'll just end it there. I think I'm at the 30-minute mark, so probably a good time to stop. And happy to take any questions that you all have.
Thank you so much, Sam. The work was so fantastic. And I also love that you also build tools and share these tools with other people so that they can make projects out of it. So if anybody have a question or more than one question, please put them in the chat, or, you know, do the Zoom hand thing and I'll call you on. You can ask the question directly. So I actually have a lot of questions for you. I've written them down here on this paper. So maybe while the other questions may be marinating, I can begin. So I guess just like to kind of like circle back. I mean, your practice and your trajectory, the way you're connecting different ideas, you know, from your literature background to going into, you know, or leftist you know, activist practices to going to making software-based project. It's so inspiring. I'm very curious about how, you know, after doing it for so long, like how do you maintain the through line, or how do you like continue to get inspiration? Are you still nowadays thinking about ideas around situationism or the derive, or, you know, have you feel like the world has changed to a degree where you're also looking at different kinds of ways of, practicing theory, but maybe from like other kinds of theories or sources?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, obviously the world has definitely changed since I was like looking at that stuff. And also I don't know, like if my politics has changed that much. But I think that the thing, I don't know. I mean, I feel like the sort of things that I've become like more interested in are actually questions around like kind of like anthropology and people like James C. Scott and stuff, like thinking about like how states are made, or people like David Graeber and stuff like that. So I think, and also like the prison abolition movement has been like really sort of like important to me in my thinking about like uh, uh, my thinking around projects and stuff. Uh, but I don't know, like it's definitely it's funny because like when you kind of like get into something when you're like young, it kind of sticks with you for like a long time in a certain sense. So I'm definitely not like going around like reading like situate like Gita Board anymore, but like I'm sure it's like still like yeah kind of impelling me forward in different ways. And then I think like just in terms of like getting inspiration for making things, I think it's like at some point it just becomes habit in a way, and it's like a way of like relating to and responding to like what's going on around you and the world and stuff, and you kind of just keep doing it.
Oh yeah, Richard, I think Richard has a question. If you want to unmute yourself, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I don't know if you can hear me. I guess super interesting work. I'm a bit curious. A lot of the work uses a lot of data. Let's say everybody from the GoFundMe posts, or the real estate industry, or your LinkedIn contacts. Are there a lot of interactions with the people on the other end, or have there been, or do you want them to exist? Have you been in touch with real estate agents or people that actually were on these GoFundMe campaigns, or maybe the people that make GoFundMe
Yeah,
and so on?
it sort of depends on the project, but yeah, like I frequently have interactions with people, and they're either kind of baked into the project itself, like they're sort of part of it, or they're unintentional. So like with like LinkedIn, at least at the time that I was doing it, like I had it set up so that like when my bot was like looking at someone's profile, like they would see that I was looking at them, and so I ended up like making LinkedIn friends with like a lot of those people, which is kind of like an interesting like outcome. As far as like the like one of the most interesting interactions I've had like was that, well, two things. Like one with the white collar project, I sent an email out. I found like the email addresses of like 3,000 mayors, like small town mayors across the country, and I sent them like a mass email saying that I was like a researcher doing this like work on white collar crime prevention, and like did they want to see like my new like white collar crime predictor. And so like I had like a number of interactions that were pretty funny as a result of that. The actual thing that was like the most interesting with that one was that somebody, because that project like got some press, and so people in the predictive policing industry learned about it. And then I had some pretty interesting interactions with like people who are making like real predictive policing applications. So there was like at the time a product called Hunch Lab. And like someone from Hunch Lab like got in touch with us, and we had like this very strange meeting where he like basically was trying to show us that his like, because the problem with predictive policing is it's all like super racist, right? And it uses like data from racist police departments, and then it reproduces the racism, right? So it's like if there's a neighborhood that's over policed, this is going to tell the cops to continue to over police that neighborhood, right? And so, but the people who like make Hunch Lab, they're not like, you know, in the Klan or something. They think that they're doing something good, right? Like they think that they're doing something that's like really good, and actually eliminating bias, right? So he, like, this guy who is, I will just also say, a perfectly sweet, nice guy, showed us like the decision tree that was part of their model, right? And like one of the things on it that he was using as an example of like why it was like wasn't racist was that it used phases of the moon as like part of like what was predicting crime. So it's like if it's like a full moon, it was like using that to like try to, you know, and you were just like, this is like actually like, it's actually like unbelievable, right? You know, it's just so extraordinary. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, werewolf crime. So I've had a few encounters like that. I've also gotten a lot of vitriol for some of my work in the past too, and gotten like a lot of negative attention for it. And that happens too sometimes. But I really do think it's like part of for me, it's like a part, I guess, like part of the practice, I guess, right? Just part of what I'm doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm actually quite curious how, you know, like the idea of these negative, I guess, you know, you can call it negative, or it depends on which way you see it, these kind of interactions or result or press or relationship or bridges that get burned or whatnot. What, like, how far have you considered incorporating that into the artwork itself, or have you, if that makes sense?
I tend to like, I mean, it sort of depends what it is. Like, there's a kind of aspect of mail art, I guess you could say. It's like where you're like literally like sending correspondence back and forth. And I am interested in that. I don't usually like, I frequently incorporate it when I talk about the work, but I don't usually incorporate it into the work itself. Although like there's been like the most recent project that Tika and I are doing is about carbon offsets, and I didn't really talk about it, but we did we did kind of a funny experiment for a festival a few weeks ago where I created like I got the phone numbers of like 1,000 oil and gas executives, like executives at oil and gas companies, and participants from the festival could use this like call center interface I made to like call and talk to the oil and gas executives. And their goal was just to keep them on the phone for as long as possible to like distract them from their jobs, basically. And so I guess like in that sense, I guess I am trying to kind of bring it a little bit more in like this sort of like some of these like communications and have them be like front and center, right? But like, I don't know, part of me is like hesitant to, it just sort of depends, like the like I think it's like I think I should incorporate some of these interactions more, but some of them, like, you know, it's okay just to kind of toss away. Some of them aren't so pleasant also, and I think it's fine to just kind of like, put them aside. But yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, I think, you know, I guess I'm trying to connect what you were saying about, yeah, just like taking inspirations from people like James C. Scott or David Graeber. And I guess I'm particularly thinking about a recent talk James C. Scott gave about the state. And I think the memorable 3 words that he used was that the state has, you know, a state can be a functional state, but it has three consistent quality, which is the service I give is always going to be conditional, revocable, and limited. And I feel like so much of the work that you are doing is, you know, different kinds of like reflection of that, different kind of reflection of the limitation and where the line is precisely drawn in this kind of very make that line very legible in a certain way. And so I think my question really just stemmed from a curiosity of, you know, like whether that line feels important as a mirror, whether that line feels like important as a point of stoppage, because that is where the mirror becomes most effective within the context of art. And like also, yeah, how do you kind of like blend or separate like the kind of differences between art and activism?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely don't try to pretend that I'm like an activist, you know? I think that like there's certain things, I can't remember, like I was in some panel and someone said this, but I can't remember who it was. Anyway, someone said, it's not I didn't invent this, but like, you know, there's like certain like things that you can do as an artist that you can't do as an activist, right? And vice versa, right? And there's like certain things you can do as like a journalist you can't do as an artist, and certain things you can do as an artist you can't do as a journalist, you know? And so like there are these different sort of capacities that each field has, right? And I think it's, you know, I don't want to, I never like, I try to never claim that I'm doing something that I'm not doing, right? To avoid confusion and like, just to be honest, just for the sake of honesty, right? And so I think that like, there's like, there's a sort of, there's something that I'm exploring with the projects that is like activisty, right? But it's like activisty, it's not activism necessarily. Although I think that it can like give fuel to activists, and I talk to them and I try to support activists also. But I wouldn't claim necessarily that I myself am one, right? And part of the reason is that like a lot of the projects I do are kind of like, they're either like, I mean, a lot of them are collaborative, but they're usually like frequently they're sort of like small scale collaborations, right? And I don't think you can be like an efficient, like, I don't think you can really be like a successful activist if there's like only 3 of you, 2 of you, or 1 of you, right? Like, you know, I think that there's like, there's a kind of like, community quality, and also because like art making and creative practice like really sort of like privileges like individual or small group action, right? It doesn't sort of privilege collective action, and it's there's like a kind of like difficult, there's a real difficulty there. But I will also say that like whenever I sort of try to make a work that's like, I mean, I always try, again, like always try to be honest about what it is that I'm doing, and also always try to, if I'm like, say like reverse engineering a predictive policing system, or the latest project is about carbon offsets, we're gonna make a carbon offset marketplace, right? Like I always try to use this sort of like go through the same steps that everyone else who's trying to make those things for real is doing, right? And make like a good faith effort to do it.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I feel like it's interesting because, you know, I think from like the very first work that you start showing, I started, or like the kind of data, or even just like, you know, scraping LinkedIn images, especially of people who are not your friends, as a kind of like practice. It's, in a way, it reminds me of, you know, certain other people, such as like Kyle McDonald's, where you have to kind of enter another world, right? Enter another frame of references in another world and social circles that you don't really belong to or even identify with. And I think that there is, you know, and a kind of like particular position that your practice take on that I think it's quite unique, and take a kind of, yeah, a kind of like moving beyond like what feels convenient or direct or linear for an artist to do, or to kind of like mingle themselves within in order to achieve. So I see a question in the chat from Marquise. If you could do anything in your creative practice, what would it be?
That's a good question. Like just as a creative, I mean, it'd be fun to make like a feature length movie. That sounds hard. I'd love to do that. I'd love to like write a little bit more, you know. I write a little bit, but I'd love to write more, and feel good about that. And yeah, those are probably, I mean, that's pretty boring answers on my part, but I mean, actually, like I mean, the thing that I really always enjoy doing is just like um, coming up with some really ridiculous idea and then just trying to see it through, you know? And so that's like the thing that I love. That's the thing that I love to do, you know? So I have a really stupid idea right now that I'm trying to rope people into. It's not a secret. It's like I want it to be public so that we can all get involved. And you know how Eric Adams has introduced like the Boston Robotics dogs at robots as like for policing, you know? So they're like police robot dogs. I want to make an army of like criminal robot squirrels to distract the robot police dogs. And that's, I don't know if I'm going to do it or not, but that, I would love to do that next. That would be really fun. Yeah.
That does sound really fun. I see another question by Jonah. Yes, Jonah, I see you unmute yourself.
Hey, what's up? Yeah. I was just
Hi.
looking at some of your work. Hi, Sam. Very cool stuff. I'm a big fan. But basically I was looking at, you know, you look at power relationships, right? Corporate power relationships, crime, that kind of things. And I'm just wondering like how you see artists using those relationships to, are they trying to change society? Are they trying to just manipulate the way people think? Are they trying to create new interfaces for people to play with in that area? So I was wondering what your approach would be in that realm.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I mean, I think it's like behooves everyone to think about like what, like, you know, what they can do to shift power dynamics and like whatever it is that your, you know, your field is or your profession or your sort of like everyday life, right? And I think that like one thing I've been thinking a lot about lately, again, you know, not just myself, but collaboratively, is like thinking about like, well, we get access to these resources and you get access to them as students and I get access to them as a teacher and sometimes as an artist, right? And like, how can we take those resources and deploy them to ends that we see fit, right? You know, so like if you get a grant from the school, like what are you going to do with that money, right? Are you going to take it yourself, or are you going to try to think about a way to redistribute it in some kind of way? Of course, maybe you need the money and so you're just going to keep it because like that's how you're going to pay rent and eat food, but maybe you also like can think about other ways of doing something with it, which kind of like leads to like a broader kind of conversation about, you know, how institutional resources are used, right? So I do think it's like the job of everyone to sort of be constantly asking these questions and to be making like bold attempts to, I don't know, just like make their institutions more democratic, right? And also like, I mean, like, I don't know if my work is necessarily doing that. I think sometimes occasionally like I try to, but like also like, you know, when we think about like power dynamics and kind of like exploring the way like power acts on the internet in particular, right? Like to me, I'm really interested in like how just silly it is a lot of the times, how stupid it is, you know, how goofy it is, right? And thinking about what that, like what does that mean? And again, kind of like there's a sort of like you could almost call it, right, like a kind of like fascist, capitalist, surreal, sublime, or something that, like, if you look at the web long enough, you start to at least, this sort of torrent of everything, it starts to make you feel a bit crazy. But I also think that, like, there's something quite interesting in concentrating things into and sort of being forced to encounter it. I don't know if that answers your questions.
Sure. In a way, I mean, as the brains behind the or half brains behind the stupid hackathon, I can see kind of what that's like, because actually a lot of the projects that I was working on during those events were all web-based things and kind of inspired by that area.
Yeah.
For those of you that don't know, Sam started this awesome hackathon that hopefully will keep going at some point, called the Stupid Hackathon, that was done at ITP. Maybe Parsons should do one. Yeah, or somebody
You all should do it. Yeah, you should take it over. Do you want to be the boss of the Stupid Hackathon? You can be. You can be. I think that, like, it's interesting, like, when you like, I used to organize this event with Winger Bearskin, and haven't done it in like a long time. And I think it just got like a little like, I think it's still really good. Like, I don't think it's like a bad event, but like I got kind of like just like a little worn out from it. You know what I mean? And so I'd be really happy if somebody wanted to shepherd it back into existence in New York City. Not like now I'm looking at you, Jonah. So
okay, I have bigger aspirations. It should go global, not just New York.
Yeah.
But totally.
Right.
I think you have another question though in the chat, but thanks for answering mine.
Of course.
Yeah, I love the stupid hackathon. We can definitely have more practices here to be more stupid. So Marquise asked another question. Can you point us towards some resources you've used for scraping the web for information?
Sure, yeah. So, like, well, first of all, like, I have like a little, like, kind of not quite complete online class that you can take a look at, and I'm pasting the link into the chat. It's called scrapism.lav.io. And it's got some like videos and written tutorials about like how to do web scraping. It's a little bit out of date, but it does some of the stuff. So one of my goals in the next, I don't know, 6 months is to kind of revamp that website and kind of update it with more stuff. I also teach a class at the School for Product Computation, or I have been, on web scraping. And then last but not least, I mean, like, I think that just like, I mean, do you all do P5? Do you all do like P5, or do you do Python? Does anyone do Python? Or is it, yeah. So, like, you can
Python. We have Python electives, and P5 is required.
Got it. So there's like a lot of like I always do it in Python just because I like Python, but like you can definitely do it in JavaScript too. It really, really helps to have a little bit of familiarity with the command line. And then it doesn't really matter. Like, it's like one of these things that you can do in any programming language that you feel comfortable with. But it really helps to just like a little bit of command line, like, knowledge goes like a long way. And one of the videos in that tutorial series is like about the command line, and how to use it. It's also just something like everyone should. I just think everyone should like know how to do. So useful information.
I have another question following that, which is what type of advice do you have for students who are interested in using scraping as a method in their projects? Any kind of like best practices or ethical boundary that you've considered or struggle with, or particular or the type of risk or threat that they might need to consider for themselves or for others.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just there's a few things, right? One is like harm that can occur to you, right? Of course, then the other is harm that you can do to other people, right? And I think both need to be pretty carefully considered before you start to make use of material that you just like take from the internet, right? So, for example, it's quite easy to, without really intending to create like a dogpiling situation online, right? Like, let's say you make a video where you kind of like, I don't know, poking fun at somebody, right? And maybe it goes viral, and then maybe everyone is poking fun at that person, right? And it was fine if it was just like one little video that you made and showed a friend, but maybe it's not fine if it's like, thousands of random strangers, right? And I think it's very difficult. I think it can be very difficult to understand like what's going to happen when you put things on the internet, right? Maybe less so now than it was before. But so I think you have to be very careful about thinking like, well, and it's just like the same kind of cliched thing of like punching up instead of punching down, right? So you just have to be really thoughtful about, am I using material from someone who is already in an exploitative situation, from someone who, is already at a disadvantage in terms of power dynamics, right? Or is it the opposite, right? And I think it's really important to just consider that. And then of course, like there's like harm that, can come to you. And that's like, honestly, like it's completely legal to scrape websites, but like sometimes you can get in trouble anyway. And you just have to think about if it's worth the pain of it. But really, like it's mostly just like terms of service violations that can happen. So it's not the end of the world. But like, let's say you're scraping like Facebook or something and you're logged into Facebook. Maybe you'll get your Facebook account banned. Maybe you don't care, right? Because who cares? But like just something to think about. It's also sort of like I think that Alison Parrish has a really good sort of line on this when she's talking about making bots and generative text things and thinking like, well, I would never like my standards. This is like a paraphrase for like, my standards for what I publish are the same if a computer program wrote it or if I wrote it myself, right? So it's like you can't just like, and you have to think about that when you're using material that you find also, right? Because you're taking material and then republishing it. You have to think like, is there stuff in this material that I wouldn't want to put out to the world? And if that's the case, you have to be really careful about that, right? Just the same way that like you could write a goofy bot that, says something misogynist or something. You have to think, oh, well, like, I really need to make sure that the content that the bot is writing is stuff that I would feel comfortable also publishing. It's sort of a similar thing when you're working with material you find online.
That was really, really helpful. Thank you so much, Sam. And thank you so much for sharing all these resources. I know that at 4 p.m., a lot of people have classes, including myself. So yeah, let's give a round of applause to Sam. Thank you so much for being here and answering all our questions today.
Of course, thanks so much, you guys. Hey, buddy.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, John.
See
Thanks,
you later.
I'll see y'all later.
Thanks, Shin.
Thank you.